to dispel that lie that is being put around for the last decade. And that is our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, our spokesman on international trade, William Dartmouth, MEP.
Now, before I get into it, I should say that this speech will feature some slides. Our slides are, to the best of our ability, truthful, valid, and accurate. But our slides probably do not have the production values of the well-known broadcaster Channel 4. Production values are, of course, one set of values, but there are other values. And as we in the UK Independence Party have consistently seen with Channel 4, Channel 4's values, unfortunately, are falsehood, innuendo, smear. Now to the European Union, the EU. We in Britain are in a relationship with the EU, and that relationship has become dependent, dysfunctional, autodestructive. But other countries have better relationships with their trading partners. Let's take a look at the North American Free Trade Area, which is usually known by its initials as NAFTA. Now, in trade terms, NAFTA is approximately the same size as the EU. And if you look at the first part of the slide, you can see that just over 70% of the exports of Mexico went to the two other countries in NAFTA. With Canada, the equivalent figure is almost 80%. By comparison, with the UK and the EU, if you look at this lower part of the slide, the figure is less than 45%, and that is falling. Nevertheless, we are constantly told that because maybe 45% of our exports go to the EU, that is in itself sufficient reason for the UK to be in the EU political union. As we've just seen, Canada and Mexico have a much higher proportion of their exports going to the North American Free Trade Area. Notwithstanding, no serious person puts this forward as a reason for Canada and Mexico to be in a political union with the United States. They cannot even find a Miliband brother to claim that. We should also note that with NAFTA, there are border posts between the United States and Canada, and there are border controls between the United States and Mexico. In the very successful trading bloc that is NAFTA, there is no free movement of people, none at all. You can trade and trade successfully without free movement of people, and nobody and that includes the Prime Minister, should tell you otherwise. Now, to the European Union and trade. The essential background is that the UK has been a leader in international trade for centuries, long before the European Union was even thought of. Now I'm going to my next slide here. This slide shows the value of trade between 20 countries outside the EU and the EU member states in 2013. You will note the sheer value of this trade, 2,593 billion euros. To emphasize, in 2013, the value of this trade was worth more than the entire economy of France. For that matter, this trade was worth more than the entire economy here in the UK. And by the way, all of this trade takes place without any retainers being paid to Mr. Jack Straw or Sir Malcolm Rivkin. It's also important that 6 of the top 10 trading countries, indeed 11 of the top 20, do not have trade agreements with the EU. These countries trade with the EU within the framework and under the rules of the World Trade Organization. And that is why, and that is one option for the UK after Brexit, and one that is always available. The EU cannot and could not block it. Next point. Many will assume that a member state of the EU will inevitably export more per head of population to other member states than a country which is not a member state. Let's take a look at Switzerland. To be clear, not a member of the EU. As the slide shows, Switzerland has consistently exported to the EU a multiple per head of what we manage in the UK. The average is over 4.5 times. The point is this: a country does not have to be in the European Union in order to be able to trade with it and trade very successfully. We would absolutely not be leaving EU markets when we exit the EU. Again, it is crystal clear that trade would and will continue. That all trade would cease is not a tenable proposition. The facts are clear. It is just not true. It follows that the myth of the 3 million lost jobs is not only a myth, it is a deliberate deceit on the electors of our country. And it remains a deliberate deceit, even when it is the leader of the opposition and the Deputy Prime Minister and other established politicians who say it. Our membership of the European Union is also justified on the basis of what they call influence. Let's look at the facts. First, EU commissioners. Now, here's a slide that I'm not sure we needed. The facts are the UK originally appointed 2 commissioners out of 13. We now appoint just 1 of 28. And for the mathematically minded, the percentage of UK appointed commissioners has gone down to just 3.6%. But of course, when the Prime Minister appointed his SPAD crony, Lord Hill, also known as Lord Who, as the UK's commissioner, our commissioner isn't worth 3.6%. It's more like 0.6%, and that's on a very good day. Now, second, let's take a look at MEPs from the UK. Again, we used to have 19.8% of MEPs. Now it's less than half that. Third, and finally, let's take a look at the UK's vote in the Council of Ministers. It used to be 17%. Again, it's now less than half that, at 8.2%. The UK has tried to block proposals from the European Commission in the last 5 years 55 times. Now, I'm sure everybody here is wondering how many of those proposals, of those 55 proposals, the UK actually succeeded in blocking. Is it 35 of the 55? Is it 25 of the 55? No. Surely it must be at least 10 of the 55. I'm afraid not. The answer, as somebody very well informed in the audience said, is none. Niente, zero, zilch, nil. The fact of the matter is that the chant of influence, influence, influence that you hear all the time from Europhile politicians and their hangers-on in the media has absolutely no basis in reality at all. As has been said from the floor, we have no meaningful influence. The fact is, each new member state dilutes our influence, but bizarrely and against our national interest, the 3 establishment parties, each and every one of them, are cheerleaders for more countries to join the EU. They even want Turkey. Now, back to trade. When we exit the EU, we regain our ability to renegotiate our own trade agreements for ourselves, to go back also to Switzerland, a country, please bear in mind, with an economy 1/4 the size of the UK's. Switzerland negotiates its own trade agreements, and this slide shows how Switzerland has done. And really, it's terribly simple. The EU has trade agreements that Switzerland does not, with Algeria, Andorra, San Marino. And Switzerland has trade agreements which the EU does not, with Canada, China, Japan. And it's not just Switzerland. Chile, New Zealand, Iceland, unlike the UK, can negotiate their own trade agreements. And Chile, New Zealand, even Iceland, all have trade agreements with China. By comparison, the EU does not and will not anytime soon. On trade, it is crystal clear, as indeed with everything else, UK exit is the best way forward for our country. But that's the future. At the present time, our commerce, business, and industries are hampered by alien regulation. Our English common law is made inferior to the rulings of foreign courts. Our National Health Service is hobbled by EU directive. Our people can be subjected to the European arrest warrant. Our fish are stolen. We cannot even choose what vacuum cleaners we use. The European Commission extends its sway over us even unto light bulbs. Shimon Peres once said, "People age, dreams are ageless." And we in UKIP have a dream. Our dream is of an independent country that is not a province in a protectionist European superstate. That is international and outward-looking, that can make its own choices, that controls its own borders, that has an ethical policy on immigration, that is self-confident and, above all, believes in itself. We believe in Britain. This is what we, above all, in UKIP stand for. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.